welcome once again to the India Today Mood of the Nation survey brought to you by Karvi. All the data, of course, in India Today magazine. Remember, this is a survey that's continued for 2 decades, a biannual survey every January and August, where we give you a sense of what the country thinks on the hot button issues of the day.
And over the last 20 years, India Today's Mood of the Nation has built a formidable reputation as India's foremost barometer to get a sense of which way the winds are blowing and what would happen if elections are held today. And over the next 1 hour, that's the question we hope to answer.
That's right. We'll have several special guests joining us on this show. We've got Raj Chengappa, the editorial director of India Today magazine. He's with us. We're also joined by Rahul Verma, political analyst with the Center for Policy Research. We're joined by Dr. Sandeep Shastri, leading political analyst, and joined by Gaurav Ballabh of the Congress and Nalin Kohli of the BJP. So we'll get various views, and Dr. Sanjay Kumar also is joining us from the CSDS. Okay, let's then go and find out all the big questions, the answers to the big questions, including who would be winning an election if it was held today, a general election. We are in 2021, but that's what the biannual survey does, gives you a sense of where we stand today. Let's start, Rahul, by looking at vote share if polls were held today. And these are the numbers that stand out. 43% to the NDA. The ruling NDA gets 43%. The UPA gets 27%. Others get 30%. And if you look at that in comparison to what our poll said in August, the MOTN, the Mood of the Nation, had the NDA at 42%. So there's a 1% climb up for the NDA. The UPA is where it is, 27%. Others, 31%, are now down to 30%. So if you look at the worm as it is looking at, the NDA is more or less rock solid. Lok Sabha 2019, 45%, now 43%, just a marginal dip. And the UPA is exactly where it was almost 2 years ago during the Lok Sabha elections.
Quite incredible, Rajdeep, because you can't have a year where a country faces more adversity and shocks than this. You've had the pandemic, you've had the economic recession, you've had Chinese aggression, and despite all of that, over the last 5 months, they've been able to increase their overall vote share by 1%. Raj Chengappa, quick initial word from you. You'd imagine that in the midst of so much adversity, any government, no matter who's running it, its popularity is likely to take a hit. Your poll by Karvi for India Today suggests that that's not the case. They're holding firm.
And I think that's quite remarkable, Rahul. Look at what happened to President Trump, now ex-President Trump. He did badly with the pandemic. He was voted out of power. I mean, we haven't seen a sitting US president voted out of power for the last 30 years, I think. Whereas when it comes to Prime Minister Modi and the BJP, they not only consolidate in the raging pandemic. If you recall, in January 2019, their ratings were down. They, in fact, had dropped below the majority, the BJP itself. And they pick up in the midst of the raging pandemic in August 2020. And now in January 2021, you have them in, a slight dip, but holding, which is, as you said, these three major crises the country faces. What does it indicate? It indicates that they have faith in the government to deliver on these issues. They believe Mr. Modi is the best bet at the moment. And therefore, you're seeing the numbers that's there. And just as a counter, I think the opposition, if it is just held, is really a bad show for them. Because here they had great opportunity.
They couldn't have had a bigger opportunity.
Yeah. And they have, I think, squandered it.
Let's come to what would these votes translate into when it comes into seats. So if elections were held today, and I'll first deal with the NDA-UPA alliance, and then we'll come to a party-wise breakup. But Karvi Insights tells India Today that if elections were held today, and this is the first time you're seeing it on your screen right now, the NDA alliance would get 321 seats. That's 21 seats down from the Lok Sabha elections of 2019, when they picked up 353 seats. But even then, it's a remarkable performance given the fact that you can't, from a governance perspective, have a tougher year than this. The UPA is likely to bag 93 seats. That's exactly the number of seats they got in 2019. And others taken together might end up at 129. If I were to look at a trend line, starting from the Lok Sabha elections of May 2019 to now, The NDA from 353 went to 357 in our first MOTN, after that to 303, then 316, and now settling at 321. It's always been above 300. January 2020 was the low point, but 320, Rajdeep, in the middle of all the adversity that we're dealing with, is remarkable.
And also remember that the 353 was when the Shiv Sena was part of the NDA and indeed the Akalis. So what you could say somewhere is that the NDA is holding its own and the opposition is simply not lifting, it's not taking off. You know, it's stuck where it is, and there is no evidence here of anti-incumbency. That's very clear, that the gap between the government and the opposition remains as wide as ever. That's the first really big takeaway that you can give from these numbers. And this is almost now 2 years. So almost halfway, some would say, just approaching the 2-year mark of Mr. Modi 2.0. That's interesting. And if you look at these numbers, it remains steady. I think that's the, that's what gives you the analysis that this government has been able to retain its vote share.
This is
and
great
that's
news
very, very important.
From the government's perspective, but Gaurav Vallabh, from the opposition's perspective, if this were a cricketing analogy, this is where the pitch